Well, thank you very much for having me today. As was shared, my name is Jason Alves. I'm a program manager for your Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. And by no means am I a superhero. I'm kind of like the Mikey. I just get a handful of different programs here in our counseling and wellness division that I have the distinct honor of managing for our State Department of Veterans Affairs. And one of those is the Veterans Conservation Corps, which many of you may be aware of. But that's what we're going to discuss a little bit today, and specifically with the Veterans Conservation Corps, the internship program, and kind of how that fits into this conversation around engaging your veterans in conservation. Next slide. So we have a couple of objectives today that I'd like to kind of work with you guys on, and definitely I hope that by the end of this, when we come back to the objectives, there's an opportunity to ask questions. If I don't answer some of these things, or if there is more clarification needed, I'd love to be able to make sure that we hit that. But the intention today would be to gain a better understanding of the VCC, the Veterans Conservation Corps, have a conversation that helps for conservation districts to better understand veterans populations, demographics, and some of the needs that may be represented by veterans in your district, and then identify possible ways to partner with your Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs and Veterans Conservation Corps. So the Veterans Conservation Corps was founded in 2008 through state legislation, and it was founded with the intention of providing ecotherapy or applied ecopsychology to returning veterans or long since returned veterans. And it was founded in the memory of a gentleman named John Beal. John Beal was a Vietnam era veteran who in his early 20s suffered several heart attacks, basically living a hard life, living with undiagnosed post-traumatic stress, smoking and drinking and those types of things. And after this heart attack in his early 20s, or several heart attacks in his early 20s, the way the story goes is he went to the hospital and was given a prognosis of about 6 months left to live. After receiving that prognosis, he went back to his house, which was on Ham Creek, one of the tributaries to the Duwamish River. And in seeing a lot of the destruction, or at least a lot of the pollution and stuff that was going on in Ham Creek at the time, he decided that if he's only got a little bit left on this earth, he was going to make it better before he checked out. And he lived another 24 years as a result. And when asked right before the VCC was founded in his memory, he said it was his ability to get back, get involved, and see salmon return to the Duwamish River and eventually Ham Creek that gave him his extended life. So in 2008, the VCC was founded to provide similar opportunities to veterans that were returning from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as figure out ways to integrate with long since returned veterans to provide similar opportunities as part of our State Department of Veterans Affairs Counseling and Wellness Division. We operated primarily as a program with a lot of the community colleges through their habitat restoration or conservation-based programs. But in 2014, we saw our first relationship develop with a conservation district, and this was an individual placement with Stevens Conservation District. The veteran was brought on primarily to work with the local fish hatchery, but then actually saw that position to kind of morph into some of his experience or where he wanted to go, and was able to take on some work with the Firewise program. In 2017, we established our first crew with Snohomish Conservation District, working on rain garden installations through a grant that the Conservation District had. And then in 2018, we saw one of our first largest growth, which was the growth to 5 conservation districts, bringing on VCC interns to do a varied number of things, but still within that framework of providing ecotherapy or applied ecopsychology. And then that takes us to 2021, where we now have 13 conservation districts working with the Veterans Conservation Corps, either in the individual placement role, and we'll go into a little bit of detail about what the difference is between individual placement and or through a contractor crew-based model throughout the state. So I said we'll talk about different types of partnerships. Ways to partner with the Veterans Conservation Corps do include internships, as well as informal partnerships that seek to support veterans' engagement with the Conservation District. Individual placements tend to use that general fund state dollars that were given when the VCC was founded in 2008, where the Department of Veterans Affairs pays for the stipend for that veteran to stay on for a flexible contract. This does include a site participation fee starting at $250 for a part-time member at 6 months, and then there's a sliding scale all the way up to a full-time member that can serve up to 12 months. The big thing here is that we do provide quite a bit of flexibility. One of the things that's important to know about the Veterans Conservation Corps is that, again, we're founded for that purpose of providing ecotherapy or applied ecopsychology. So our Veterans Conservation Corps members, the folks that we're bringing on as intern, are usually the focus of the position. And what we really want to do is work with that individual to find a way to give them an opportunity to see themselves as being successful, find a way to engage with the conservation district. And that can be done through, again, the flexibility of part-time, full-time, 6 all the way up to 12 months. We do have a standard that no Veterans Conservation Corps member serves over 2 years in consecutive internships, and that's intended to give the Veterans Conservation Corps member an opportunity to focus on what that next step is. Oftentimes a VCC member, when they're in the internship, will be working on that next step. If that's identifying how to engage in higher education, if that's identifying how to find employment with the conservation district and or outside of the conservation district. But again, that VCC member really is the focus of the Veterans Conservation Corps internship program. The other model is the crew model, as you noticed with the Snohomish Conservation District, where the conservation district provides the total funding, but then the VCC still provides that same management, the recruitment, and the HR kind of role that we also provide with the individual placement. We seek to have a lead at the conservation district to operate as almost a staff or a crew lead for the VCC. And then we work really closely with that individual or those individuals to provide that co-management kind of role to make sure that we're providing, again, the intent of the bill or the intent of the VCC, which is to focus on that Veterans Conservation Corps member. And then informal partnerships where we support the conservation district, similar to the work that we get to do with vets on the farm, where we find other ways to partner and support the veterans that are enrolled in programming at the conservation district. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. Okay. So why the VCC? And more importantly, why does the VCC want to partner with conservation districts? And this largely comes from the thought that there is a number of veterans in the state of Washington that we are not reaching as a State Department of Veterans Affairs. It is important to note that of all of the veterans that exist in the country, it's less than 1/3 of all veterans are accessing their earned benefits. And when I say earned benefits, that's everything from the GI Bill to disability compensation to VA-related pensions and or the VA home loan program. So the vast majority of veterans are not accessing their earned benefits. And this number increases when we talk about rural veterans or veterans that are outside of some of our urban centers. So when we look at Washington State, we have over 575,000 veterans that live in the state. That makes us about number 12 in the nation for percentage of population that are veterans. Obviously, most of those veterans, around 106,000, live in King County, but by percentage, Island County, Mason, Kitsap, Thurston, Jefferson, and Clallam, make up some of the top counties with 19%, 16, 15, and 14. On average, in the state of Washington, the youngest veterans live in Pierce and Thurston County. And then on average, the oldest veterans, the older veterans are in Wahkiakum and San Juan County. And when we get to some of our ag census data, that really kind of comes, we'll talk a little bit more about that and why that's really important. Less than 1/3 of all veterans utilize, as I shared, their benefits, and actually some of the highest utilization rates being among white males between 25 and 35, with the lowest utilization rate for those veterans-related benefits. So that's everything veterans-related, being Native American and Alaskan Natives. So rural veterans, when we talk about rural veterans specifically, about 44% of all of our military recruits, so that's everybody that serves in the United States military, 44% are coming from rural areas. What that looks like in Washington State then is about 113,000 veterans. These are folks that have previously served or living in rural parts of the state. And then 22,000, it's estimated 22,000 rural veterans have a service-connected disability. That is something that was caused in the military and that they are receiving some level of compensation from the federal VA for those service-connected disabilities. And that is with that extremely low utilization rate. One of the things that we believe the Veterans Conservation Corps, when we partner with conservation districts, then can support that low utilization rate, as well as support that estimated 22,000 veterans with service-connected disabilities, is really highlighted when we talk about the unemployment rates or the unemployment numbers. So there's two numbers when we talk about unemployment. Unemployment drawing benefits, this is the number that was traditionally reported. These are folks that they're unemployed. They are receiving benefits, meaning that they have to check in, they have to actively continue to seek employment or look for new employment opportunities. And then there's another number that's often not reported or underreported, and that's unemployed not seeking. These are folks that are unemployed or underemployed, not in the working force, but not actively looking for or drawing benefits from the employment department. So when we look at urban rates, about 3.8% are unemployed drawing benefits, 22.5% are unemployed not seeking. And these numbers really increase when we talk about rural areas, with 5.5% drawing benefits and 31.2% unemployed not seeking. And that's really important when we think about that 22,000 veterans. And again, this is with low utilization rates, but with the 22,000 veterans that are gaining some VA-related compensation for disability in a rural community, may be unemployed and just don't see how they can enter the workforce. When a median income is lower in a rural area, that disability benefit may be enough to keep the lights on. It may be enough to live in an apartment and play Xbox and order pizza, but is it really enough to thrive and find my entry or one's entry into the workforce? And this is where we see a really meaningful connection between what the Veterans Conservation Corps does and the ability of the conservation districts to really serve and represent communities across the state. In 2017, the Ag Census, it was the first time ever that the Ag Census asked the question of agricultural producers in the state of Washington, or like across the country, what their status or if they had served in the U.S. military. When we look specifically at Washington State, the percentage of producers that reported that they had served in the military, we found out that we actually have a lot of veterans in Washington State that are producers or actively, they own farmland and are cultivating in Washington State, with a couple of really big pockets. I mentioned earlier about some of our older populations in the state being San Juan County and Wahkiakum County, and then some of our younger populations being Thurston and Pierce County when we specifically look at veterans. Interestingly enough, when we kind of overlay those maps, you can see that some of our highest percentage of producers actively farming that identified as veterans, being Wahkiakum County with over 25% of all producers in Wahkiakum County identifying as being veterans, and then over 17% in Stevens County being veterans. Those would be our two highest veteran producer counties, and then quickly followed by what is the South Sound, Thurston, Pierce, Mason, Jefferson, Clallam area. Going into the peninsula, I apologize. So we have pockets in the state where we have a higher, or at least an outsized number of producers having identified as serving in the military. With a total of 9,627 producers in Washington State identifying as serving in the military, about 8,000 or 92% identify as male, and only 706 or 7.3% identify as female. Of those that identified as being veterans, about 50.38% have no off-farm work, and 79.525% have been operating their farm for 11 years or more. They are much older, at 65 years of age or older, where the average of veterans is, so the average is 67.7. Why is this really important? Sorry, I got distracted a little bit. And by percentage, slightly more likely, farmer veterans are slightly more likely to be Native American, Alaskan Native, and then less likely than the general farming population to be Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin or Asian. So what does this mean? This means that you already have veterans that are part of your district, veterans that are landowners or farmers or producers in your district. You have veterans that you're probably already working with. You also have veterans that are part of that population that I mentioned before that are potentially looking for a way into the workforce or looking for a way to connect to local community. I want to step back to the slide real quick. One of the things that's really telling here and is important to think about when we talk about the average age of veterans that are farming being much older than the general farming population, as well as the higher percentage of not having any off-farm work, is we're talking about a population that also has one of the lowest utilization rates of federal VA benefits. So veterans that are Vietnam era are most likely the majority of our farm owners or the farm owners in your district. Having no access or have not access to the federal VA, they're primed or they're in a really great position to be reintroduced to some of those benefits that potentially could help out with succession, can help out with that next step. And where we're thinking is that veterans benefits and connections to programs like the Veterans Conservation Corps can operate almost as a farm preservation tool and an opportunity for the districts to engage with that population, as well as identify ways for this upcoming farmer veterans or Veterans Conservation Corps members, some of the folks that we're just now engaging, to find access to land and find access to some of those mentors and programming. So coming back to, again, how can we partner? How can we partner to serve existing and or new veterans in your district? We can work through internships, as mentioned before, identifying flexible contracts, understanding that it is a limited pool of state funded and opportunities there. We can look at crews, as we mentioned before, same design as the individual placements, but much more flexibility since the conservation district, you all really get to drive what that vehicle looks like. And then informal partnerships, thinking about training and support, expansion of the Vets on the Farm model, working with individual conservation districts and Vicky Carter in the Spokane Conservation District to find ways of implementing similar tools at other conservation districts across the state. And as always, the opportunity to engage in technical assistance. How can conversations with the Veterans Conservation Corps increase one's conservation district cultural competency and or opportunities to engage in some of those landowners or the veterans that are already in your district to engage in some of the programming that's being offered. So what could be the impact? Through these partnerships, whether informal or formal, I think that there is amazing impact that can be done and engaged with your district veterans or the veterans that are in your conservation district. We know that work is associated with a decrease in intensity of depression or suicidal thoughts. So when we give opportunities for veterans to engage in the conservation district, find a connection to their community, we are making a very meaningful impact on things like depression. Veterans with mental health conditions often experience occupational impairment. So these veterans that we're talking about that are a part of that large unemployed not seeking population in rural communities oftentimes could be fighting or struggling with an undiagnosed and or diagnosed mental health condition that could be easily supported through work-based programming, kind of like the Veterans Conservation Corps. And the conservation districts provide an advantage to veterans by providing employment and or community connections where the veterans live. Oftentimes when we talk about veterans programming, we're really thinking about, the urban areas, the I-5 corridor when we talk about programs that are increasing veterans hiring or looking at veterans hiring initiatives. The thing that I think is really important and meaningful and impactful when we talk about partnering with conservation districts is you guys are all across the state. All 45, I believe, conservation districts have an opportunity for us to really kind of provide impact in folks' backyards and provide ways for folks to connect to their community in a way that makes sense to them. And it's not just employment, as we've mentioned, it's an opportunity to really meaningful impact to one's well-being and ability to connect. Went a little bit faster than I planned. I apologize, everybody. So these are some of the resources that I used. I've shared my slide deck, happy to share it with anybody else and give access to that. These were the objectives. Wanted to gain a better understanding of the Veterans Conservation Corps, go over some of the veterans population demographics and potential needs in your districts, and then identify possible ways to partner, whether informal or formal. And that would be that. So I am more than open to answering questions I know that I went a little bit faster than I planned, and that is my fault. Is there any questions?
Perfectly all right there, Jason. I do see a hand up. So Vanessa, I'm going to unmute you.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead.
So I don't really have a question, but so my name's Vanessa Lee, and I became a VCC member on May 3rd of this year. And I just wanted to say that it is an amazing program, and I'm super excited to be involved.
Thank you, Vanessa.
And, yeah, I had some other things too. I'm actually from Wahkiakum County, and I got out of the Navy in 2007, and I have a little mini farm, and so I'm from that rural area, and I'm also Native American. So like when I found this program, I was like, oh my gosh, this is completely made for me. And I'm also a WSU student. Next year I graduate in the spring with my environmental degree. So I have been really fortunate to get this position. Oh, I'm at the Lewis Conservation District.
Do you want to share a little bit of what you're doing there at the Conservation District, Vanessa?
Sure. So right now we have been working on VSP, and we are going out and making contact with all the farmers in Lewis County. And we've been spending a lot of time out in Mossy Rock and Morton and Onalaska, and just going door to door and reaching out and finding out the practices that they've been doing and how we can help them in making the VSP plans. So it's been a lot of community outreach, and I'm excited because I didn't know how much I really loved, meeting new people and interacting with everyone. It's been very eye-opening, and I'm not quite sure exactly what I'm going to do when I'm graduating, and that's another thing that I'm loving about this, and getting to see what all the conservation districts are doing, and being able to attend WADE and learn even more about more pathways to employment so yeah.
It's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Appreciate that. We do have a request for the slide deck. So Jason, when we wrap up today, if you wouldn't mind emailing that to me, I'll make sure we get it posted.
Of course.
And also another question came in. I'm familiar with the AmeriCorps model. Can we view the VCC as a similar program?
Yes. VCC is operating with a lot of some of the similarities that you would see in AmeriCorps program, but offering a little bit different, which you'll see with some of the flexibility, and then also with we don't have some of the same constraints that AmeriCorps program does for age of folks that are involved in those types of things. So the VCC is operating almost as kind of like a cousin to the AmeriCorps program, but you could definitely look at using VCC internships to fill some of those same roles. But understand, because the VCC is an ecotherapy or applied ecopsychology based program, it is focused on the individual and not necessarily on the conservation project. So we do want to give you that little bit of a note that there may need to be a little bit more flexibility in how you work with us. But definitely, like as I've seen before, and as we've seen with VCC members across the state, when we focus on that individual and we provide that really meaningful connection to the work that you guys are doing, oftentimes the amount of work and the type of work that gets done is heads and heels above, because the individual wants to be there. They're really excited about it, and they really want to see the conservation district be successful in the project or the work of the VCC members being brought on to support. Hopefully that kind of answers.
Yep, great answer. Thanks for sharing. Came in through the questions box. Also, just some kudos. Vanessa's doing a great job. She's a pleasure to work with. Thanks, Bob. That's from Bob Amrine. other questions, don't hesitate to use that questions box or raise your hand this morning. We'll get you unmuted so you can ask Jason your questions verbally.
I would be happy to share if anybody wants to get a hold of me, the ag census data and what that looks like across the state. Definitely willing to dive into some more of that data with folks if you're interested to get a better picture of potentially how many of the landowners that you're already engaging with or potentially engaging with are part of the military community, and discuss kind of what that means. Like I said before, we have a lot of veterans that are the landowners that are underutilizing or not utilizing some of those veterans benefits. When we do think about succession planning or farmland preservation, we do believe this is a really important or a big tool that can be used in that conversation. So if that's of interest, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me, and I will happily share any of that data with everybody.
Thanks, Jason. Another question coming in. How would we get started?
To get started, it's just a matter of reaching out. You can reach out to me directly, and then what I'll do is I'll work with Kim Pham, who is our internship program specialist, and then she'll work with you on some of the details of what the position would be, what some of the expectations are, and then there is a contract that we then sign to kind of manage that partnership. I will say that right now, we're coming into the new fiscal year, so it's a really good time to be reaching out and asking if there's an opportunity to partner. But because we are kind of contingent upon recruitment of the position, I will be honest with everybody that COVID's really kind of thrown a big wrench into that system. We have some of our conservation district positions or some of our VCC internships that, we got people beating down the door trying to come in. And then we have others that we're just really having a tough time trying to find folks to apply for those positions or interview for those positions. So I can't promise what that recruitment process will look like. So I can't give an idea of how long the timeline will be necessarily. But the contracting, becoming a partner and applying to be part of the VCC, that's a pretty standard, quick process. If that hopefully answers some questions.
Yep, the feedback was very helpful. Thanks. Anyone in the audience with us this morning with any feedback on participating in the VCC program with DVA? Any districts that would like to share? What's your experience been? Has it been beneficial for your district as well as those vets that have participated with you all? So if you have any feedback like that, don't be shy. Put your hand up or add that into the questions box. Another question coming in. Jason, can you talk about the veteran sensitivity training that you offer? It was a great benefit to our district and working with our VCC crew members.
Mm-hmm. So part of that technical assistance that I offer to all conservation districts, if you're interested, is a veterans cultural competency training that we have titled Engaging in the Second Mission. This is kind of it's a once over the world kind of concept of why do veterans sometimes run into transitional pieces or difficulty with transition. Really kind of focusing on the translation of skill sets, right? So when we're in the military, we learn very specific skills around leadership, around communication, around diversity, inclusion, but there's a translation barrier sometimes when we get out. So the cultural competency training really kind of focuses on that, specifically tries to give some tools to the participants on how to engage in that conversation and really kind of help out with that translation. And then focuses on the world of positive psychology and or positive inquiry to really help find ways of engaging again in that second mission. I mentioned a little bit of that second mission before when we were talking about the VCC versus an AmeriCorps model. When we engage in that communication, we engage in that translation, what Veterans Conservation Corps members often do is they really find that second mission, that new mission, that thing they really want to put their heart into, being the work of the conservation district or being engaged in that community, and very much some success there. The training is right around 2.5 to 3 hours, but it's just a few slides It's really a lot of community-based or a lot of conversation-based. So we pose a handful of questions, go over some of the concepts of that transition from military to home life, and then really try to engage in conversations around what people's shared experiences are around some of those things. And that's 100% available free to any conservation district that would be interested. Definitely see that as part of the VCC mission and increasing this conversation around the state on how to engage with veterans and really have some of that conversation. And again, that kind of goes back to some of the slides that I shared earlier, that when we can engage in those conversations and we have that translation tool, we are talking about saving people's lives. We are talking about finding community for a population that tends to isolate when they transition out of the military. So it's a very powerful tool that even if you don't intend or don't really see the value right now in having a VCC member, we would still be very happy to help provide that training or engage in that.
Thanks so much, Jason. We were recently able, a small group of us as a commission, to get to experience that training as well. And it's not what you expect. Me, in not only working with veterans, but also as a family member of veterans. So if you're thinking about this, I would suggest you get in touch with you, right, Jason, to maybe talk about scheduling a training for your district. And Alyssa has put Jason's email address in the chat box. So if you haven't checked out that, Jason's email address is there for you. Couple more comments coming in the chat box. Alyssa is kicking those comments out to everyone. So take a look in the questions box to see those comments. Other questions from anyone this morning? Okay, let's see. Josh, you should be good to go.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Jason, this is Josh from the Conservation Commission. First off, thank you. This was really awesome to hear, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. I'm just curious, you know, on that slide where you showed all the counties and kind of the vet statistics, how does your program do outreach in those communities around the state and identify folks that would be interested in the program? Thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, part of the VCC model is really trying to look at engaging in the community in a way that makes sense. So right now, when we do a VCC internship or we have programming that we're partnering with a conservation district, we really try to lean heavily on understanding what the current relationships are that the conservation district has. Obviously, we do some statewide stuff, or we do some stuff through the Department of Veterans Affairs and our Facebook or Twitter, or through our newsletters and stuff like that. But some of the most successful recruitments is when the conservation district works with us to kind of engage in their community or folks that they already have conversations with. If that kind of helps answer the question, Josh. Another thing that is coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. We will be in the future through a grant that we have through the Federal VA's Office of Rural Health. We will be doing some direct mailer campaigns with Washington Farmland Trust in the near future, trying to engage in some of those higher density counties when we look at the farmer veterans as part of the total farmer veterans percentage. We are looking to do some direct mailer campaigns with Washington Farmland Trust. But yeah. So we're trying to figure out new and inventive ways or new ways to engage with these folks, because like I said before, there is a need and there's a want within our agency to figure out ways to engage with folks. So I think that's a long way of saying, if you have other ways or other suggestions and stuff like that, we would love, again, to seek more ways to partner with the conservation districts and the commission in engaging this rural population. And even non-rural population, but again, this population of veterans that we see as needing connection potentially.